It was interesting what you were talking about earlier about the relationship of music to drama, and I think there was you were discussing when things went from the Steiner era of film music into a more modern techniques that are used now, and you could see the evolution. Really, you have to go back to the 19th century to opera and the silent film period, which was actually 30 years. We don't think of silent films as being really so long, but it was actually 30 years. Mm-hmm. And in that 30 years, it set the template, really, for film music, because it made the transition from opera, where every bar in an opera, if it's a Wagner, every bar is essential to the work, in part of the telling of that story on stage. And when you see great opera, you see the synchronization between the singers and the orchestra and the set design. It's a complete, immersion in the story. So that went into the silent movie era, where the music was now being used to tell stories, because you didn't have the context of the theater, of the actors speaking lines, speaking dialogue. And then once sound came in the late 20s, Steiner and Korngold then used that technique, and they embellished that and used that in orchestral recordings that were synchronized to the film. And then things started to go away from that technique after the war in the 50s, actually in the late 50s, when jazz became popular and more integrated into the culture, and jazz was starting to be used in film scoring. Man with the Golden Arm, Elmer Bernstein, those scores, and that led into a whole expansion of music in the 60s. And then Williams really brought back the older sound of the 30s and the 40s in the 1970s on his work with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. And ever since then, since the 70s, it's been a real expansion of ideas, like Johnny Greenwood's score, which really harkens back to Penderecki's work in the 50s. And it's actually a very formalized type of composition. But it's interesting to note that